right, so I'm going to explain sort of where we started and where we're at. Those of us old enough to remember 2001, that was a very bad day for America, and it will stick with me forever. I remember being here during the attack in Washington and asking myself, what can I do to make sure this never happens again? We did some things, made some mistakes, did some things right, but I will remind you at the end of this discussion that before the attack, the lights were blinking. When the Taliban took over in Afghanistan, started killing women in soccer stadiums for sport and blowing up Buddhist statutes, to think that wouldn't affect us was pretty naive. So, take that off. Sort of a debate in my party, to be honest with you, about American first, what does that mean, and isolationism. Isolationism sounds good, doesn't work, never has, never will. When people are willing to do horrible things to others in the name of religion or a master race, to think they will leave you alone is just really very naive. So when Hitler wanted to kill all the Jews because they were an inferior race, for a long time America sat on the sidelines. Voices like Lindbergh and others saying this is not our fight, no more foreign wars. Well, you wind up allowing the guy to get stronger. You could probably stop him dozens of times, but nobody wanted to get involved because of the after effect of World War I. Well, what have we learned? Allowing Hitler to get stronger, not standing up to his abuse of the Jewish people and his desire for a master race, led to about 50 million people getting killed and hundreds of thousands of Americans getting killed because of World War II. So America First was a slogan being said in the 30s. President Trump talks about America First. It's different to me. If America First is isolationism, count me out. I don't believe it is. If America First is weak, count me out. I don't believe it is. So America First and strong, what does it mean? Doesn't mean you don't care about the other parts of the world, but you got to get your own backyard right. And you do expect other people to carry their fair share of burden. That's what it means to me. And it means having a strong military, not a weak military. It means letting people know if you screw around with America or you regret doing it, just ask Soleimani. But you can't, he's dead. He had blood on his hands, and President Trump saw that his reign of terror ended. That is being strong. So that's sort of where we're at on our party right now. I'm going to jump from 2001 to 2011. So in 2001, America united. We were hurt as a nation. The country went through a lot of turmoil. 3,000 of our citizens almost were killed in various ways. But terrorists, if they could kill 3 million of us, they would have. So we go to the Mideast. We make mistakes. The source of the problem was Afghanistan. Bush decides to get involved in Iraq. Saddam Hussein was truly a bad guy, but we can debate whether or not we should have done that. But the one thing that I said, Senator McCain said, and Senator Lieberman said, we're down to about 10,000 troops. We need an insurance policy force to make sure that the forces we're trying to contain, radical Islam in Iraq, do not come back. So President Obama had an option of leaving about 10,000, and he chose to pull the plug. And here's what I said. I feel all we have worked for, fought for, and sacrificed for is very much in jeopardy. By today's announcement, I hope I am wrong and the President is right, but I fear this decision has set in motion events that will come back to haunt our country. That's what I said when President Obama wanted to pull the plug on Iraq. This is what Senator McCain said. This decision will be viewed as a strategic victory for our enemies in the Middle East, especially the Iranian regime, which has worked relentlessly to ensure a full withdrawal of U.S. troops from Iraq. Senator Lieberman, this failure puts at greater risk all that so many Americans and Iraqis have fought, sacrificed, and in the thousands of cases gave their lives to achieve an Iraq that is self-governing, self-defending, and aligned with the responsible nations of the world in the fight against Islamic extremism and terrorism. My last line was, but I fear this decision has set in motion events that will come back to haunt us. Hoping I was wrong. Here's what happened. We pulled the plug on Iraq. The JV team called ISIS runs wild. And the carnage that followed was devastating to the world. The attacks after the withdrawal in 2011. In 2015, 130 people killed in Paris by attacks that came from the caliphate that was established after our withdrawal. 2016, 86 people killed in Nice, France. I can go on and on and on. 2017, Istanbul, Turkey. Just on and on, carnage by the thousands throughout the world, and it came to get us here too. The Orlando, Florida nightclub attack was inspired by somebody who pledged allegiance to ISIS. You just remember all the beheadings in Syria. They took large parts of Iraq and Syria after the withdrawal. Everything we were worried about actually came true, even greater than I thought. The Yazidi genocide, the Yazidi people were raped and murdered by the tens of thousands, all because everybody was ready to leave Iraq. That was in 2011. Let's fast forward to 2021. After having left Iraq, saw what happened, had to go back in, we decided to pull out of Afghanistan, where it all started, 2021. So if you had told me in 2001 we would allow the Taliban to come back 20 years later, I would not have believed it, but we did. We wanted 2,500, that's what I wanted, more if you needed it, to keep the country from falling apart, a residual follow-on force. Secretary Blinken said if 20 years and hundreds of billions of dollars in support, equipment, and training did not suffice, why would another year or 5 or 10 make a difference? Let me answer that question. If after all that blood and treasure, we pull the plug because we're tired based on the passage of time, and the enemy comes back and they take over, then other people in the world will see us as weak. So, Secretary Blinken, you didn't understand the ripple effect of allowing Afghanistan to fall back into the hands of terrorists. And President Biden, against sound military advice, you chose to pull the plug. 10 years earlier, President Obama pulled the plug on Iraq. The rise of ISIS. Apparently, it's hard for us to learn much at all, because it's the right one. It's the right decision for our people, the right one for our brave service members who have risked their lives serving our nation, and it's the right one for America. He's talking about pulling out of Afghanistan. President Biden, it was a horribly bad decision. But he's not the only one. Some of my best friends were sort of in that mindset. I write to express my support for President Trump's plan for the prompt withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan. Senator Hawley, after the loss of over 2,000 American service members and thousands others injured in action, I agreed it was past time to get our troops out of Afghanistan. Senator Marshall, really good friends. All I can say is not when we leave, it's what we leave behind. So we pulled the plug jointly on Afghanistan. President Trump, at the time of the end of his term, had about 2,500 service members still. He was going to leave them there, I hope and think, but at the end of the day, there was a plan to withdraw by May. I think he put in place it was conditional, and the Taliban didn't abide by any of the conditions. So when President Biden announced he's going to get out, I think on May 1st, getting out of Afghanistan is a wonderful and positive thing to do. I plan to withdraw on May 1st, and we should keep as close to that schedule as possible. So that was President Trump. And I can't remember exactly when we got out, but it wasn't very much after that. So 20 years, almost to the day, after 9/11, you got Republicans and Democrats saying, enough already, let's leave, not understanding why we should stay. And apparently, leaving in Iraq in 2011, nobody really remembered that much at all. So the Secretary of Defense said, I don't have any regrets about supporting the decision to leave Afghanistan. He really probably needs to resign, quite frankly. I like the man personally, but he's been so wrong so often, I've lost all confidence in his ability to make good, sound decisions. And when he speaks, nobody listens. So the idea that he would defend what happened in Afghanistan, the withdrawal, I have no regrets, is a bit disappointing because I have a ton of them. So what happened after we withdrew or announced we're leaving? 13 service members were killed in the disaster that was a withdrawal. And now the talking point is that was a disaster that was embarrassing. We shouldn't have done it that way. Well, I'll just give you my 2 cents worth. There is no good way to do a dumb thing. What was dumb is to leave Afghanistan and allow ISIS-K and ISIS and Al-Qaeda to come back when a fairly small force compared to what we'd done in the past could have held the country together. So it was just carnage. The 13 brave Americans killed at Abbey Gate. What happened after our withdrawal? Remember the C-17 going down the runway with Afghans jumping on the wheel, the wings, babies being passed over the wire to soldiers. It was just really hard for me to sleep, quite frankly, for days after that. And the Veterans Administration had a real spike in assistance from veterans because all those who fought and lost loved ones and sacrificed in Afghanistan were pretty upset. So that was in 2021. 10 years after we withdrew from Iraq and ISIS stormed the world, we made the same stupid decision to withdraw in Afghanistan. The rest is history. The Taliban has taken over. Now, the question is to Secretary Blinken, did our withdrawal set in motion bad things? I would say it did. February 24th, 2022, Russia invades Ukraine. Many of us believe that when we pulled the plug on Afghanistan, it showed a lack of resolve and all the bad guys got bolder. So you'll never convince me that our decision in 21 did not encourage and lead to aggression by Russia in 2022. Now, we wanted pre-invasion sanctions. Senator Menendez, Blumenthal, I think White House, we had a package of sanctions to hit Russia as the buildup was coming. You could see the amassing of Russian forces, and we said, why don't we tell Russia right now, here's what comes your way if you invade. And many of us wanted to give lethal weapons to Ukraine before the invasion to deter Putin. Well, the administration said no to pre-invasion sanctions. They said no to sending in weapons, any weapons. They didn't want to be provocative. Well, it didn't work. They invaded. and your effort to deter the invasion never occurred. Once the war started, many of my Democratic friends, to their credit, joined all of us to help Ukraine the best we could. We were arguing for military assistance that would change the tide of battle. We were told that Kyiv would fall in 2 or 3 weeks. Well, they were wrong. The Ukrainians have been fighting like tigers. They have put a hurting on the Russian military. And for months after the invasion, I, along with many others, Democrats included, were pushing the Biden administration to help. How do you fight the Russians? You need more tanks. It took 10 months to get the first delivery of M1 Abrams tanks after Secretary Austin opposed tanks. 1 year and 7 months to get to ATACMS. They resisted HIMARS, long-range artillery. They've yet to get the F-16s. So every time we would talk about a weapon system that would change the course of battle, it was like pulling teeth. And it's amazing the Ukrainians have done as well as they have. But the people who decided not to impose pre-invasion sanctions, the people who wanted to slow walk military assistance, are the same people who wanted to get out of Afghanistan, the same people that wanted to withdraw from Iraq. I don't mean to be overly critical, but they lost me a long time ago. Devastation in Ukraine, great country, proud people. It's just been terrible. Putin, by the way, is now an indicted international war criminal for kidnapping and stealing Ukrainian children. And this is over 2 years into the war. What else has happened since 9/11? There was a defense budget approved by this body against my wishes to produce a military budget that was below inflation. At a time when you had a war with Russia and Ukraine, you had the rise of radical Islamic terrorism, you had Iran pushing everybody around in the Mideast, and China threatening their neighbors. So the response in 2024, FY24 budget, in light of all of these threats, to pass a military budget below inflation. What are we thinking? Have we learned nothing from 9/11? So, everybody talks about China for good reason. We're not at war with China, thank God. But I, along with many of my colleagues, want to be tough on China. Well, if you want to be tough on China, you got to have credibility. The budget we passed over my objection, which was agreed to by the former Speaker of the House, a Republican, has put us on track to have less ships in the Navy by 2030 than we have today. And you want to be tough on China. The Navy tells us they need about 450 manned and unmanned vessels to deal with the threats we face throughout the world. We passed a military budget that goes from 292 ships to by 2030 to 290, not 450. What does it take to get 450 ships in the Navy? 5% spending above inflation for about a decade. We're spending below inflation. So I don't think we're ever going to get there. What's China doing? Well, they got 370 ships. By 2030, they're going to have 435. Today, we have 292. The Chinese Navy is 370. By 2030, they're going to have 435, and we're going to have 290. Well, we must come up with some super-duper ship. We're going in the wrong direction. What are we thinking as a nation? How do you expect to deter China when you're reducing your military spending below inflation, you're reducing the number of ships available to help our friends in Taiwan and throughout the world, and they're dramatically increasing their Navy, do you think they feel deterred? I don't think so. So I really don't want to hear any more talk about being tough on China until we pass a budget that shows we actually mean what we say. That's 2022. We have Russia invade Ukraine. 21, we get out of Afghanistan. 22, Russia invades Ukraine. And 23, we pass a budget below inflation. So what also happened in 2023? October the 7th, Hamas attacks Israel. Now, I heard my colleague Senator Sanders talk about we shouldn't be sending any more aid to Israel. I respectfully disagree. This was the largest loss of life to the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Hamas is the perpetrator of the attack, and there was this belief, somewhat in Israel, somewhat in America, you could keep this caged tiger somewhat fed, but they wouldn't bite you. That proved not to be true. They openly talk about destroying the Jewish people. Israel pulled out of Gaza, I think in 2005 or 8, I can't remember the date. It wasn't very long till Hamas took over, and anybody who wanted to make peace with Israel, they killed. Hamas did, and they have an underground tunnel complex, and that money they used to build the tunnels, pretty much all the aid the world has given them, and all of a sudden Israel's the bad guy. I hate that so many people are being killed, but Hamas uses the Palestinian people in Gaza as human shields. They want Israel to kill more of their people because they think it helps their cause to isolate Israel. I've been to Israel more times than I can count. I think the IDF is a professional military force. And here's what's so ironic. The Jewish state, Israel, if they wanted to, could kill everybody in Palestine. They have the ability to do that. The Palestinians would love to kill everybody in Israel, they just don't have the ability. The one that could do it has chosen not to. The one with limited capability is willing to bet the farm on killing as many as they could. What an upside-down world we are after 9/11. If you had told, if somebody in a parliament had made the speech that Senator Sanders just made, criticizing America for our response after being viciously attacked, I think would have taken offense to that. And we're only talking about October. I mean, we're talking about months, not years. There were 24 brigades that Hamas had. They're down to the last 4 or 5. They're hiding among 1 million Palestinians. I don't blame Israel for wanting to destroy them all. I actually support Saudi Arabia and Israel recognizing each other and trying to find a better future for the Palestinians. That better future cannot include Hamas. And the First Minister of Northern Ireland, which is a beautiful place, said something, I really don't know her, I just thought it was an odd thing to say, that one day Hamas will be seen as part of the solution. I'm not so sure that's the case. I don't ever see Hamas being considered part of the solution anytime. So that's 2023. What else has happened in 2023 and now 24? So Secretary Austin came before our committee. We're helping Israel. There's money for Israel in this package, and I want to help Israel. There's money for Ukraine in this package. I want to help Ukraine. There's money for Taiwan in this package. I want to help them too. I asked Secretary Austin, is it a red line for Iran to orchestrate an attack on our forces that kills an American in Syria or Iraq? Can you say that? This was weeks before they actually did this. I think Iran should be held accountable for the activities of Iran. Can we say to Iran, if you escalate the second front, if you activate Hezbollah against the state of Israel to create a second front, we'll come after you? Whether or not we attack Iran because of a decision on the part of Lebanese Hezbollah, that's a presidential decision. But back to my original question, I wanted him to tell the world so the Iranians could hear that if your proxies kill an American, we're coming after you, not just the proxies. Well, unfortunately, it wasn't long after that exchange that these three brave Americans were killed in 24 by Iranian militia. So 2020, we get attacked. We say never again. 2024, Iranian militia are killing American service members. In Jordan, there have been almost 200 attacks since the invasion of Hamas against Israel. And we're helping Israel and Hamas and all the terrorists throughout the world, including Iran, are trying to pay us back. After 9/11, I didn't think this headline would be possible. Iran closer than ever to weaponizing uranium, building nuclear bomb. So 20-something years after 9/11, we've got a budget below inflation. We pulled out of Iraq, 10 years later pulled out of Afghanistan. Russia is trying to dismember Ukraine. Hamas attacked Israel with ferocity and barbarity beyond what the Nazis did. How could all this happen? And Iran, the great Satan, religious Nazis, on the verge of getting a nuclear weapon. What the hell happened? Now we're going to turn to something else that happened. September the 1st, 11th, 2001, I don't know how many illegal crossings we had at the southern border, but it wasn't that big of an issue. We did immigration reform with President Bush, trying to secure a border. So in September 11th, 2001, if you told people in 2024 we had a border that was completely broken, wide open, terrorism on the rise, fentanyl coming in to kill hundreds of thousands of Americans every year, radical Islamic extremists on the terrorist watch list pouring through the border, nobody would have believed you. What happened? Did we learn anything from 9/11? Apparently not. So when President Trump left office in December of 2020, we had the lowest illegal crossings in 40 years. For FY20, it was 458,000, 21, 1.7 million, 22, 2.4, 23, 2.5. We're on track FY24 for 3.6 million. Over 9 million have come across since President Biden has been in office. He inherited the most secure border we've had in a long time. We've been talking about what to do. In April of 23, Secretary Mayorkas said we need policy changes to remove individuals who do not qualify for asylum. This asylum system needs to be reformed from top to bottom. Policy changes. And to Senator Langford's credit, and Sinema and Murphy and others, they've been working for a very long time to come up with a border security proposal that would change asylum. And I thought they did a pretty good job, to be honest with you. But there was more to be done. The bipartisan bill was a serious effort. It had many good things, but not quite everything I wanted for sure. So you see from 2020 to 2023, there's been a 300% increase in the encounters. 172 people on the terrorist watch list came through in FY23, the end of September of last year. Here's the one that just blows me away. Parole. During the Trump-Obama presidency, parole was granted at about 5,600 per year. In FY22, the Biden administration paroled 795,000 people. FY23, 802,000. We're well on our way to 1 million this time. Again, President Obama and Trump paroled 5,623 on average per year. President Biden has paroled 795,561 in FY22 alone. Now, what am I talking about when it comes to parole? Here's the law. The DHS Secretary, in his discretion, may parole into the United States temporarily under such conditions as he may prescribe, only on a case-by-case basis, for urgent humanitarian reasons or significant public benefit any alien applying for admission to the United States. Urgent humanitarian reasons, significant public benefit, case-by-case basis. That law has been completely obliterated. The bipartisan bill is trying to rein in the abuse of parole. They did a pretty good job, but not enough for me. That's why I wanted to make sure we would debate the bipartisan bill the same way we did the Gang of Eight, which I was part of. That was on the floor of the United States Senate for a couple of weeks. You have to defend your product. I want to put a cap on parole. And here's what's coming, Mr. President. We're going to start a parole watch list. This is a discretionary decision. You don't need to change the law. They just need to quit obliterating the law and follow it. So I'm going to track every week how many people the Biden administration parole, because it's supposed to be done case by case, 5,600 per year for Trump and Obama, and now about 800,000 a year. Clearly, these people in the Biden administration want to wave in a lot of folks, and when I hear Secretary Mayorkas say he doesn't bear any of the blame, that's offensive, because when you wave in that many, word gets out, if you show up, you're going to get in. You have an 85% chance, if you show up to the U.S. border, of being allowed in as of last month. As long as people believe there's an 85% chance of getting into the country, they will never stop coming. The Biden administration repealed 90-something executive orders. They canceled the Remain in Mexico policy. Anything Trump did, they changed because they didn't want to be like Trump. Well, you've accomplished that goal. You're not like President Trump when it comes to securing our border, and I think that's one of the reasons President Biden is going to lose. The bottom line is you had a pretty secure border, you tore up all the infrastructure President Trump put in place, and you want to blame him. Give me a break. You're taking parole and abusing the law, and when 85% chance of getting in the country continues, you're never going to stop the flow. So don't tell me, Secretary Mayorkas, that your policies had nothing to do with this tsunami, I dare say, invasion of America. And it's just not people. Drugs. In 2021, there were 71,238 people died from fentanyl overdose. We've seized enough fentanyl coming through the southern border to kill 2.5 billion people. Most of it's coming through China. It comes through the southern border. It is literally an attack on America, and we're not doing much to respond. There was a provision in the bipartisan bill that addressed the fentanyl problem. It was pretty good, but not enough. Again, enough fentanyl to kill everybody in America. 2,700 pounds was seized in one fiscal year alone. And one fiscal year, enough to kill everybody in America. How could that happen after 9/11? After 9/11, we created terrorist watch list. I wish we'd had one before 9/11. Now, after 9/11, one of the things we wanted to do was kind of watch people we thought were going to be terrorists or associated with terrorists. And here's what's happened. In 2017, we found 2. 2018, we found 6. 2019, 0. 2023, 2021, 15. We withdraw from Afghanistan. 2022, Russia invades Ukraine. 98. 2023, Hamas attacks Israel. 172. 50 already since September. All of these people are probably up to no good. CNN, not Fox, 2023. Smugglers with ties to ISIS help migrants enter U.S. from Mexico, raising alarm bells across government. After we pulled out of Iraq in 2011 and the JV team became ISIS and destroyed thousands of people's lives, destroyed the Yazidis, people, and created attacks on our homeland, they're still in business smuggling people into our country. How could that happen after 9/11? How could that happen after 2011? Well, it is. This is a San Diego field office warning. Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and Hezbollah are coming across in this area fighting age males associated with these jihadist groups. How could that happen in October of 2023? December the 5th, 2023, just a couple of months ago. This is FBI director's testimony before our committee responding to a question I asked. While there may have been times over the years where individual threats could have been higher here or there than they might be right now, I've never seen a time where all the threats, or so many of the threats, are all elevated at exactly the same time. So we take a border security proposal. Appreciate the people that worked on it. You did some good things. We had one cloture vote, and they pulled the plug. The fix was in on both sides here. We didn't really have a serious debate to fix a broken border. The elevated threat stream is real. We don't want an October the 7th type attack coming against America like it did Israel. We don't want another 9/11. We have our military spending below inflation. We have a border that's completely broken. We're being poisoned by fentanyl coming from China. Hamas has killed more Jews since the Holocaust. The Taliban are now in charge of Afghanistan, and the Iranians, through their proxies, are trying to kill Americans, have killed Americans, drive us out of the Mideast. Other than that, we're in good shape. How does this happen? What are we thinking as a nation? My good friend John McCain, we were wrong some. We probably had too many troops too long. I have by no means been perfect, but I think I and many others have been more right than wrong. So we have to ask ourselves as a country, how could it be that we find ourselves in this national security nightmare? And isn't it time to make corrections? And I'll talk about that in a minute. But the hits, they keep on coming. 60 Minutes did a program. If you watched it, it'd really make you mad. There's a hole in the fence near San Diego that just people literally walk through. And the Biden administration decided not to plug the hole. It got on 60 Minutes, and I think Mexico's plugged the hole. The number of migrants arriving at the southern border is unprecedented. The fastest growing group among them, Chinese migrants. We saw large groups, including many from the middle class, come through a 4-foot gap at the end of a border fence 60 miles east of San Diego. That's according to 60 Minutes a couple of weeks ago. How is this happening, and why are we letting it continue? In December, there were 302,034 border encounters in December. This is the most of any month on record ever. So when Secretary Mayorkas says they bear no responsibility, I respectfully disagree. The problem you have, Mr. Secretary, is that you've abused parole. 85% of the people that show up get in. You've waved in over 2.5 million people when Obama and Trump had 5,600 on average. You've created the magnet. You've made people believe if they get here, they're going to come and stay. You really don't deport anybody. You've been weak as water when it comes to securing our border. You want to blame Congress. I'll be the first to say Congress should do better. I've been working on comprehensive immigration reform with Senator Kennedy, I think, during the first Bush term, 2006, I believe it was, maybe the second term. The Gang of Eight bill in 2013. Been working on it, trying, just hard. I understand, but we can't stop trying. But the problem we have today is that the policy choices of the Biden administration have obliterated the border. You could bring about control of the border far better than we have today if you just re-implemented policies that were working and just get over the fact that Trump did it and actually put the American people first. As to the product that was produced by the bipartisan working group, thank you very much for your hard work. I know it's not easy. Senator Lankford on our side, one of the smartest people I know, one of the most honorable people I know. I think you produced a good product on asylum, good stuff on parole. There's some things that needed to be changed. The break glass 5,000, when you can shut down the border when you have 5,000 a day, probably should have been 1,000. There are a bunch of things. There needs to be a cap on parole to make sure it's not abused in the future, and a bunch of things we could have done to make the bill better. And the reason I'm going to vote no to this package is because I've been telling people for months now that I want to help Ukraine, I want to help Israel, I want to help Taiwan, but we got to help ourselves first. And the effort to help ourselves, I thought, was half-hearted, not consistent with what we've done in the past to try to pass an immigration bill. I thought the fix was in. So the border part we did in one day. We're jumping now to the supplemental dealing with aid to our allies. And I'm going to stick with what I've been saying. I've been to Israel and Saudi Arabia, I think, 4 times in the last 8 weeks. Love our friends in Israel. We got $10 billion in here for you. We got money that's needed to help Ukraine keep the fight going, money to harden Taiwan, and it all makes perfect sense to me. But we can't do that until we secure our own border. So I'm going to vote no, being consistent with what I've been saying, and I'm not going to Munich. It's the first time, other than being in cycle or sick, I've missed Munich. We have Codell McCain. We honor John McCain, Senator Whitehouse, and myself, and he came up to me, Sheldon Whitehouse is a wonderful man, saying he may not go to Munich if we don't do something on Ukraine. I said, well, I can withstand the wrath of the Europeans, but I can't withstand going home and telling the American people, South Carolinians particularly, that we've done a good job on their behalf when we have not. So I will not be going to Munich. I will be going to our border. While you're over in Munich talking to our friends and our allies, I will be at the border. And you can tell our friends and allies that I want to help them, but we have a national security nightmare in our own backyard, and I intend to do all I can to get a better outcome. And I meant it then, and I mean it now. Finally, here's what the FBI director said. Post-October the 7th, the attack by Hamas against Israel, you see a veritable rogues gallery of terrorist organizations calling for attacks against us, the United States. They want to attack us as payback for helping Israel. So every problem we had before October the 7th is now worse. They want to come after us because we dare help our friends in Israel. The threat level has gone to a whole other level since October the 7th. This is the FBI director just a few weeks ago telling us that October the 7th attack orchestrated by Hamas against Israel has made us more vulnerable to attack, and people want to come pay us back because we help Israel. Sort of end where I began. Dark 30 was a story about the invasion of Afghanistan after 9/11, but the folklore now is that there were blinking lights everywhere before the attack on September the 11th, and we sort of missed it. So I asked the FBI director that question. Do you see blinking lights against American national security interests? Do you see blinking lights that you equate with a threat to our homeland being attacked? I see blinking lights everywhere I turn. So folks, after 9/11, in 2024, the world is on fire. We need to help our friends. They have many problems. Israel has got its back against the wall. We need to help them with military aid. I intend to do that. We'll do that. Russia invaded Ukraine after we withdrew from Afghanistan. Americans are being killed by Iranian proxies. I am not only willing to help our allies, I'm going to insist that when we get back to appropriating, if we ever do, we get rid of this stupid budget deal that has the spending below inflation. That's just insane, given the state of the world. To the House, you've been insisting on border security as part of any package to help other countries. I get it. I get it. You're right to do that, but stop sending H.R. 2. You're not solving a problem by passing a bill that can't go anywhere. H.R. 2, no matter how much you like it, I particularly actually do like it, didn't pick up one Democratic vote in the House. You lost 2 Republicans. We put it on the floor of the Senate. We lost 1 Republican, didn't pick up 1 Democrat. It's not going to become a law. So it doesn't matter if it can't be enacted. I want to secure our border, but H.R. 2, the votes are not here for it. To my House colleagues, if you can't pick up 1 Democrat, how are we supposed to pick up 11? And when we voted on H.R. 2, we lost 1 Republican. So I would advise you to find some alternatives to H.R. 2 that would really help, and there are a bunch of them. Marshall Blackburn has like 12 ideas. I've got 3. Let's try to find some border security measures, and let's do this. There's some people rightly upset that we're giving non-lethal aid to Ukraine after all this money. Why don't we just focus on the weapons and let our European allies help them financially? Well, I don't mind helping them financially some, but our friends in the House probably are going to take a different view. So I talked to President Trump today, and he's dead set against this package. He thinks that we should make packages like this a loan, not a gift. That's what we did with Lend-Lease to the British. And in 2003, I don't know where I've got it at, I had an amendment with Senator Collins, Kay Bailey Hutchinson, and a couple others to make the reconstruction of Iraq in 2003 a loan, not a grant. Pay us back when you can, get back on your feet, get your oil industry up and running, and try to pay us back within reason as much as you can. That was defeated by a single vote. Here's where I think the American people are at. Very much supportive of Israel, very much understanding, I think, the consequences of failure in Ukraine. There's an element in my caucus that wants to pull the plug on Ukraine. Well, these are pretty much many of the same people who wanted to pull the plug on Afghanistan. My friend Rand Paul I don't know where his statement is, but he's been consistent. You got to give him that. He wanted to pull out of everywhere, still does. I would just tell him, you may be tired of fighting radical Islam. They're not tired of fighting you. You may want to become Fortress America, but it won't work. Senator Paul, our border is our last line of defense, not our first line of defense. So when you pull out of Afghanistan after the passage of time and expect it all to turn out well, you missed what happened in 2011 in Iraq. And the reason I keep saying this is that wanting a war to be over is not enough. The other side has to want it to be over too. And here's where we find ourselves in 2024. Radical Islam is getting stronger as I speak. They're back in charge of Afghanistan. And here's what I've come to learn since September the 11th, 2001 to this very minute. The enemy we're facing are religious fanatics. Hitler wanted to kill all the Jews and create a master race. He wrote a book and nobody believed him. They should have. These people are on a mission to purify Islam, to destroy the state of Israel, and come after us. And you can want them to stop. They will not stop unless you make them. So here's what I would suggest to this body and to the American people. All this time has passed, but the enemy is still there. Here's the good news. There are plenty of people over there who don't want what these guys are selling, and they're willing to fight with us. Be their partner. Breaks my heart to pull the plug on all the people that stepped forward in Afghanistan. Only God knows what kind of life they're leading right now. If you show weakness in one place, it hurts you everywhere else. Putin chose to invade in 2022, I think, because he saw us weak in 2021. So as to what we should do next, we should never count on a foreign country to protect American shores. We're going to need some level of troop presence. It doesn't have to be 100,000 by any means. Working with populations over there fighting radical Islam so they won't hit us here. If you haven't learned that by now, you have missed a lot. How many more times do we have to do the same thing to realize it is not working? So my fear is that the mistakes we have made have caught up to us big time. And when you take a broken border and put it into the mix of what's been going on for the last 23 years with radical Islam, it's a lethal cocktail to make 9/11 occur again on steroids. As I speak this evening, Israel is in a fight for its literal life. The Ayatollah is engaging America and other allies through proxies, trying to drive us out of the Mideast. And if you think the Ayatollah wants a peaceful nuclear program, you should not be allowed to drive. He wants a bomb. And if he ever got the bomb, he would use it. The first thing you got to understand is who's on the other side of the table. Rocket Man in North Korea, he's got nuclear weapons. I think he's a mafia state. I don't want him to have any more, but I don't believe he's going to wake up one day and attack us if we're strong. China wants to dominate the world in a kind of a non-lethal way, a combination of force and cheating behavior in the economy. So we got to deal with China. Russia wants to reconstruct the old Russian Empire, the old Soviet Union. And if you let Putin get away with it in Ukraine, he ain't going to stop and you're going to have a war with NATO. That's why I want to help Ukraine. But having said all that, for me to be able to convince people in South Carolina to continue to support conflicts overseas, I have to prove to them I get it when they tell me, what about our own country? So I'm not going to Munich. I'm going to the southern border. I'm not going to vote for this aid package because I think this body did not seriously entertain trying to strengthen our border. The bill is going nowhere in the House. I'm going to try to convince some of my colleagues in the House, listen to President Trump, make some of this a loan. It's called the Trump rule, I think. We're willing to help you, but pay us back if you can. I think most Americans would appreciate that change of attitude. Put together something on the new package that's more lethal aid, minus humanitarian aid, with a loan, not a grant, and some reasonable border security provisions. I think we can do two things. I think we can help our friends, and I think we can help ourselves. And it will be a more sustainable position for political leaders to take when the American people understand that others, if they can pay you back, they should. So I really believe in helping my neighbor when the barn burns down. But if they can pay me back down the road, great. Bottom line, I thought about this for days. I have been one of the leading voices on our side. You can't pull the plug on Ukraine. We got to help Israel. I'm always in a tug of war with President Trump. He did not pull all of our forces out in Afghanistan. I appreciate that. America First, to me, works. Isolationism doesn't. I know this bill is going nowhere in the House. To my House colleagues, I am voting no against aid that I believe is very much needed, and I've been an advocate for, to let you know I'm listening to you. I am letting my colleagues in my conference know it's time to sort of have other people do more if they can. I'm with you. Let's make it a loan, not a grant. Let's make it more lethal. Let's do something on the border that will actually pass. Then we can end this debacle in a pretty good spot. But, Mr. President, I will close with this. In a few minutes, the Super Bowl is going to kick off, and I, like everybody, most people in the country, are going to go watch the ball game. I've been to Iraq and Afghanistan more times than I can count. 52 was the last time, but more since. Usually with Senator McCain. I've seen the wars, go up and go down. I've seen surges. I've seen mistakes. I've made my own fair share of mistakes. But I cannot tell you how worried I am as an American right now that we've lost our vision when it comes to defending America. In 2024, my friend, we have the most porous border I have known since I've been in public service. Fentanyl is coming over, killing thousands of Americans. 9 million people have come across. The numbers on the terrorist watch list grow daily. Hamas has generated a jihad. Our help of Israel is going to make an attack on America more likely, but jihadists to pay us back. Putin, if he gets away with it, will set in motion the invasion of Taiwan by the Chinese. So why don't we do this? Why don't we find a way to help our friends in Ukraine that will be politically more sustainable? Why don't we build a bigger navy so China will be less likely to invade Taiwan? Why don't we stick with our friends in Israel as long as it takes and quit trying to tell them what's the proper response after this carnage? I do want Israel to try to lessen civilian casualties, but to our friends in Israel, I know why this is so hard. Hamas makes it that way. So we got a chance here in the next 30 days or less to come up with a solution to our border, help our allies in a way that the American people will be more supportive of. And I think it is now time for us as a nation to look to others in the world and say, do more where you can. To our friends in NATO, Trump's right, you should pay more. To our friends in Ukraine, we want to be there for you, but we're $34 trillion in debt. Let's make it a loan, pay us back when you can, if you can, and come up with a sustainable way of doing business, giving a nation so in debt. And before we do any of that, convince the American people we have the ability and the desire to protect our own backyard. America First to me means that America leads from the front, not from behind, that America shapes history, not overwhelmed by it, but America has to insist on others doing their part. I would say this: there's more others could do, and they should. Europe has been pretty good, quite frankly, on Ukraine. There's more others could do, and they should. We should go back to trying to secure our border. The House has sent a bill that had no chance of passing. The Senate took up a bipartisan bill in a way that could really not be debated. So both bodies, for different reasons, have got us in a spot where we're not going to do anything meaningful on the border. So I won't be going to Munich, I'll be going to the border. To the people in Munich who wonder why I'm going to the border, if you want me to help you, I got to convince people back home I've helped them. And I ain't going back to Munich anytime soon until we fix our own border. I will gladly vote yes on this package when it's rearranged. So the House will take up this bill that will pass, and it's going to get stuck. So I'm going to try to unstick it if I can. I'm going to urge the House to listen to the Trump rule, see if we can pay for some of this. Not pay for it, make it a loan. Pay for it if you can, and get this right before it's too late. All these years after 9/11, I'm absolutely dumbfounded as a nation how we could be where we are today. And I'm going to do my part to try to fix it. A stronger military budget, not a weaker one. Fix the border, help others, but insist they help themselves. With that, I will yield.